Well, let's get a viewpoint from the other side of the scarlet and gray septic tank from our good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. He's got a great channel right here on YouTube as well and covers the sport like almost nobody else does, man. I mean, he's got correspondents and stuff, stringers all over the country, a lot of great information. Good to see you again, Mark. And I want to get your take on what I just had to say. In summary, I actually think Michigan needed a game like this. I'd be very wary of going to Iowa City having never been punched in the mouth. You don't know how good and talented Iowa is, but you know that they will punch you in the mouth. And I think that when you're talking about senior captains like Eric All and Cade McNamara are not playing and may not play again this season, that there's a lot of talent on this team, but a lot of these guys have not had to come from behind before, have not taken a punch in the mouth before. And I just think they needed to be in a fight. There wasn't even a Washington on the schedule heading into Big Ten play, that they really needed a game like this. And I think at the very least, they just played the third most talented offense they're going to see all year. And I think it's debatable whether Maryland's offensive talent is there with a Penn State or not. But what do you think? Is that too much good spin? What say you?
I'll liken it in some respects to Ohio State's game against Notre Dame in week 1, even though I think Michigan had even more to prove because of some key players not yet going on the road in the Big Ten and proving anything yet. But Ohio State proved some things, even though it wasn't a pretty effort against Notre Dame. So let's spin ahead to Michigan here against Maryland. And of course, the guy that you got to be talking about first and foremost would be J.J. McCarthy, because he's only for 2 weeks now had the burden on his shoulders from play one all the way to the conclusion of the game and the outcome of the game on his resume. And that has come in stages now. It came against whomever they played, UConn. Then now it's a Big Ten team in Maryland, and a pretty darn good Big Ten team, and without a great defense, but an improving defense and an athletic defense and secondary in particular, and some guys up front that can make your life miserable. And now it's going to be ratcheted up considerably. So, yeah, I think so, too. I think this is a more meaningful game for Michigan and for J.J. McCarthy than had they won this one. Let's say they hit him with a 21 spot in the first quarter and they coast home to a 42-10 win. This is more meaningful for Michigan and J.J. McCarthy.
Straight up, right now, S&P Analytics, I think, have Maryland, 32 or something right around there in the country. Is there a team in college football this year that from non-conference to conference will face a bigger step up in competition than Michigan? I mean, Michigan played a couple of teams that are rated below like 10 or 15 FCS teams in the Sagarin, right? And then then you go right from that to a top 30 team right out of your own conference. I don't know that there's another team in college football this year, Mark, that will see that level of step up in competition from one juncture of the season to the next.
Yeah, I tried to scan the country as quickly as possible. I come up with Ole Miss just because Jeff Collins and Georgia Tech being so awful, 42-0 in that game. But
they're at least a Power 5 team, right?
Yeah. There's nothing comparable to that. Blake Corum, though. So I think it's important what he proved to us. We knew that the talent was there, and I enjoyed the comment that Jim Harbaugh made about that really good running backs make their move about a yard or two from the defender and then make that decision. And Blake Corum you can smell his breath at the point that he does, and that makes him impossible to get a hold of. Because
he reminds me a lot of J.K. Dobbins. They have the same build, the same kind of lean ahead. They look a lot alike in terms of the style and build that they bring to the table. I don't know that he's fast. He may not be quite that fast, but he reminds me a lot of J.K. Dobbins.
No, it's a good call. So that's the positive of it. We gave it to Blake Corum 30 times, and he proved to be a man. I brought this up to you last week. What does this Michigan running back room look like?
It looks like they shouldn't have set Donovan Edwards out last week and got cocky and got lucky to get away with it. That's what it looks like to me. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a running back room, it's a running back. And it's just one guy, and C.J. Stokes gets the ball one time and he puts it on the carpet.
Right.
Of course, that issue is compromised to a certain extent because J.J. McCarthy provides something in the run game himself, although he's not he doesn't want to be that guy, and I don't think they want him to be
Right.
that
He's
guy.
not Cam Newton out there. You don't want him taking hits 10, 15 times a game. You want him to run a few times so that every time there's a bluff run, the defense has to be honest and can't crash, and that's good enough, right? That's what you're looking for. They need Donovan Edwards back. And he is going to be back this week. He could have played last week, I believe. I think they got cocky and were lucky to get away with it.
Yeah, so then I'll turn my attention to this Maryland offensive line with 99 starts, 5 starters back from last year. You have vocalized your concerns about the pass rush to a certain extent after we saw it for 3 games, and they had a clean pocket for him most of the time.
They did. Now, here's where we did learn, though. I don't think there's any question this is the best receiver group that we're going to face until the game at the end of the season. We held up in man coverage pretty much anytime we tried it. And so there's 2 ways to do this, right? You know, Don Brown we used to lead the nation in pressure rate every year when Don Brown was here, but a lot of that was contrived. Now, I think people think that Don Brown went 0 blitz every down. He did not. We typically only blitzed 1 extra guy, but we blitzed an extra guy every play, which meant that there was always somebody there was always a hot read somewhere if you had time to get there. Or you can do the pressure the way we did it last year. We had 2 first-round picks at the edge, and you could just sit back in your zones and rush those guys. Clearly, we're not going to be able to do that this year, and most teams in college football cannot, even great teams. Georgia wasn't a great pass rush team last year, for example. They didn't have a bunch of guys with high sack totals. So this year, we're going to have to be more of the Baltimore Ravens defense, more of the exotic blitzes. We're going to do more of that, be more aggressive. And the good news is that our coverage in the back end, if it can hold up against those guys, then I know it can hold up against pretty much anybody we're playing until we get to the end of the year. And then, we'll see what happens when we get to Columbus. But I think that's something that we did learn, that against a competent offensive line, that in Maryland's is at least competent, given the experience you're talking about. A couple of their guys are listed as NFL prospects. Against a competent offensive line, we couldn't generate pressure with our front 4. What we did find out, though, is when we generated pressure against the blitz, our guys, Jamon Green, DJ Turner, they targeted Jamon Green 9 times in that game. So that was clearly their game plan to go after him. They had 4 catches for 28 yards. I'll take that every single week. All right. DJ Turner's as good of a cover corner as there is in the Big Ten. So it's just going to look more like a Baltimore Ravens defense and less like what it looked like last year, I'm afraid, Mark. They're just going to have to blitz more often.
So going back to JJ, I should have brought this part of it up. So you want the quarterback with the arm. So the issue is better with JJ missing throws downfield. I counted, I believe, 5 downfield throws. He hit the one to
he was 1 for 5 on the downfield throws. You're correct. Yes.
Yeah. The other ones were all overthrown. So you'd rather have them overthrown than underthrown in terms of evaluating your quarterback, because you can make adjustments. If the guy just doesn't have a strong enough arm for your wide receiver room, then you got problems. So he obviously doesn't have that issue, but he missed downfield. Again, it's not a large sample size, but that is the take that came out of the game more so than any. And he did get a little loose with, not necessarily with a football, but, he ran you out of a field goal once. And then there was another play at midfield going in the same direction. I don't remember at what point in the game, where he should have been thrown for a 12 or 15-yard sack because he was dancing around, and Maryland just took bad pursuit angles on him. So there's got to be a little bit less of that. Again, you got to find that fine line between letting him be an athlete and be who he is versus being a little less risk averse, possibly.
I think it's the running around in the pocket that is a bigger issue, because that's where you have guys who can get stripped from the blind side, everything of that nature. And I just think there's more pocket presence that's needed there. That internal clock, you get through your reads, you get to 4, and if there's not a place to plant your foot and throw the ball, then look to create on your own outside of the pocket, like running the football and getting the yardage and getting down, as opposed to the dancing around and the pivots and the twists. Devin Gardner did that here and was brilliant at it when he first started. Then he ended up getting lit up and killed so often that by the time we got to his senior year, You know, I mean, the guys, playing you guys with a broken foot. He was just too beat up and never fulfilled the promise that he had as a recruit. And so if you're coaching J.J. McCarthy, and I know they are, you're telling him, yeah, that stuff, we're not doing that anymore. All right. Create outside the pocket. All right, where you're a threat to both either take off and run with the ball, and then if the defense comes up, you throw it over their head. And if they don't, take what you can get, right? Do it that way, not, the pirouettes and all that other stuff back there in the pocket where you're going to get killed, particularly against a defense like they're playing this week, and you're probably going to, highly increase the odds of turnovers. The deep throw percentage you want better, but the fact that Michigan put 5 deep throws on tape in a Big Ten game, if you're watching that, from this time forward, you have to respect that. You have to know, because first of all, those aren't high percentage throws, right? Okay, but even if you connected on one more of those, and that's another 7 points, the fourth quarter looks even more different, right? Okay, but the fact that we threw 5 of those in his first Big Ten start, everybody else now has to recognize that is a regular part of our repertoire. The idea that you're just going to get away with putting 8 in the box against the run, you're just not going to be able to do that. We have a quarterback that we can throw the ball over your head with that, frankly, we didn't have last year, Mark.
And that may loosen up an Iowa defense that's suffocating. So that may be a big difference in the game. Not that you're going to score 45 on Iowa,
right.
But those throws, though, weren't off fingertips. Those were out there.
Yep.
Then the other thing, just from an overall evaluation of how good are these teams, and it's the age-old question at this stage in the season: how good is the team that you just played? If it's not Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or somebody like that, we don't know how good they are to a certain extent. But I think this Maryland team shows significant signs of breaking through the glass ceiling of the Big Ten Eastern Division, and
I think they could win 8 or 9 games this year if we count a bowl game.
Bowl to a Michigan State or a Penn State, if not winning those games. But there were about 4 gifts in that game on the Maryland side to Michigan.
Yes, there were. No question about it. But you have to take advantage of those gifts too. I just think we desperately needed to take a punch, and we did. I'd have been very concerned, because it would have looked a lot like 2016. We were just freaking housing people every week. The week before we went to Iowa City, when they looked like they were done for the year, we beat Maryland 59-3. All right. The next week we go down to Iowa City and we lose 13-12 or whatever it is. We needed to play in a mosh pit against literally anybody just to take a punch. And if you look at last year, remember, Rutgers, Big Ten opener, Michigan barely survived that game, goes on the road to a place that doesn't traditionally win a lot. All right, and that's, Camp Randall won that game. Almost the exact same scenario this year with Iowa. So we'll see what happens. What's your prediction on the game? Do you have one yet?
I don't, but I like the 10.5. I will tell you that right out of the gate. I love the 10.5 points for Iowa.
Can Iowa score 21 points if Michigan's not -2 in turnovers?
It does seem... Why Iowa continues. This is the brilliance of Phil Parker, how they continue to play way beyond the outlier statistics in terms of 2 turnovers for touchdowns against Rutgers last week. And that's a risk-averse offense that doesn't put it up much. And to be able to do that twice is incredible. So to think that they're going to be able to do that and keep it up. But
last week, Iowa won by 17 points. Despite almost an identical yards per play as Rutgers. Rutgers outgained them by almost 100 yards and had 5 more first downs. That is not a recipe to win a game by 17 points. Hell, half the time it's not a recipe to win a game at all, okay? Let alone by margin. How did they do it? Turnovers. They had 2 defensive touchdowns. That's how they did that.
And if this was anybody else in America, I would say that can't be sustained, but it continues to be sustained year after year after year for them and nobody else.
That's why what I think is going to be fascinating here, and again, this reminds me of Wisconsin. Michigan had built up, all these gaudy rushing stats, and now you're going up against the number 1 rush defense in the country in Wisconsin. Is Michigan going to really be willing to loosen up the defense and throw it, right? Similar thing here. And that is, we all know you cannot turn the ball over against Iowa, that's really their offense. On the other hand, you don't want to turn – there's no point in recruiting J.J. McCarthy and turning him into Cade McNamara either, right? However, you're trying to figure out, as you said, what that balance is. It's his fourth start, first on the road, and frankly, only second one ever against a team with a pulse. And so you're feeling him out while he's figuring it out at the same time, right? So again, it's very similar to what we saw last year, and now it just comes down to whether we see a similar result or not. Good stuff, Mark. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet.
Appreciate it.